She rescued the mafia boss's son from drowning. Now he says she belongs to him. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now, let's continue. The sun was already slipping behind the cliffs when Violet Stars finished her shift at the beach. The sky was painted in strokes of gold and amber, the ocean catching every glimmer as if reluctant to let the day end. She ran along the riverside trail, her feet pounding softly against the damp path, the rhythm of her heartbeat syncing with the whispering waves nearby. Running was the only thing that kept her steady. After losing her parents in an accident years ago, it had become her escape, her way of remembering that she was still alive. The wind tugged at her ponytail as she picked up speed, her lungs burning but her spirit calm. The scent of salt and river water filled the air. She thought of nothing but the sound of her shoes and the pulse of the earth beneath her. It was supposed to be another ordinary evening. Then she heard it, a sharp cry that cut through the soft hush of the waves. Violet stopped, breath catching. Her gaze darted toward the river. There it was again, a child's voice, thin and panicked, lost beneath the roar of the current. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Without a second thought, she sprinted toward the sound. Down the bank the water churned with violent strength, the tide dragging hard against the rocks. In the fading light she saw a small figure. It was a boy, no more than 6, flailing in the current, his arms weak, his head dipping below the surface. Violet didn't hesitate. She kicked off her shoes, stripped off her jacket, and dove into the river. The cold hit her like ice knives slicing against her skin, but she didn't care. She swam hard, every muscle burning as she fought against the current. The water pulled her one way, the child another. Each wave seemed to push her back, mocking her effort. But Violet had been here before, in the water, fighting for lives that teetered on the edge of loss. She pushed forward, her arms cutting through the current, her eyes fixed on the boy. He disappeared beneath the surface. Panic spiked in her chest. She dove deep, the world turning green and murky around her. Her fingers brushed fabric. Then small, fragile fingers gripped hers. She kicked hard, dragging them both upward. The river roared in her ears as they broke through the surface. The boy coughed violently, choking on water, his small hands clutching her arm. She kept him close, whispering softly, her voice calm, though her heart was racing. "You're okay. I've got you. Just breathe." Each stroke back to the shore was a battle. The current didn't want to let them go. Her limbs grew heavier, her vision spotted at the edges, but the boy's shallow gasps kept her moving. The moment her feet touched the riverbed, she used the last of her strength to push them both forward until they collapsed onto the muddy bank. Violet dragged in a breath that burned her lungs. The boy lay beside her, coughing water and trembling. She checked his pulse. Fortunately, it was fast, but steady. Relief flooded her. It was over, or so she thought. The sound of footsteps broke the silence. Several of them, heavy, deliberate. Violet looked up. 3 men in dark suits were running toward her. The sight didn't make sense at first. Men dressed like they belonged in a boardroom, not beside a river. They moved with purpose, and when they saw the boy, their faces changed. "Leo," one of them called, dropping to his knees beside the child. Violet froze. That name. Leo. Before she could process anything else, another figure approached. Taller, broader, moving with quiet authority that made the air around him shift. He wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled up, his eyes dark as night. There was no expression on his face, only a piercing stillness that made Violet's chest tighten. The men parted for him as if he were something more than human. Elio Rossi. She knew that name. Everyone in the city did. The whispers about the Rossi family had traveled far beyond the streets they ruled, a family that owned businesses, banks, and people. Elio was the man who commanded it all, ruthless, untouchable. He knelt beside the boy, brushing wet hair away from his face. The boy's eyes fluttered open, and he smiled faintly. "Papa." The man's face softened for only a moment. Then he looked up at Violet. She felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing, cold, assessing, yet something deeper shimmered beneath it. Gratitude, curiosity. He rose to his full height, and when he spoke, his voice was low, almost too calm. "You saved my son." The words carried no warmth. They sounded like a verdict. Violet stood, her legs trembling, water dripping from her hair onto the dirt. She tried to find her voice. "Anyone would have done the same," she said softly. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking until she could feel the power radiating off him. His presence was suffocating yet magnetic. "Not anyone," he said. "You did." The men around them said nothing. They just watched, their silence sharp as knives. Violet looked down at the boy who was clinging to her hand. Leo smiled weakly at her, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. But then Elio's gaze darkened, shifting back to her. He studied her face, his eyes tracing every detail as if committing it to memory. Then, with quiet certainty, he said something that made her stomach twist. "You belong to me now." She stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Belong? What is this man saying?" Elio turned to one of his men. "Take them home." Violet stepped back. "Wait, I can go on my own." He didn't look at her as he spoke. That wasn't a request. The tone chilled her. Leo clung tighter to her hand, looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. The innocence in his face was disarming. He whispered, "Stay." And just like that, the walls around Violet's heart cracked a little. The men guided her toward a sleek black car parked on the trail. Everything in her screamed to run, to leave before she got caught in something she didn't understand. But her legs refused to move. Elio Rossi's presence seemed to root her to the ground. He stood by the car, his eyes never leaving her. She thought she saw something flicker there, gratitude, maybe even admiration, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You saved what's mine," he said, his voice steady, dangerous. "Now you are mine too." Violet's throat went dry. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that saving someone didn't make her a possession, but the words wouldn't come. She watched him lift Leo into the car, his movements gentle despite the hardness in his face. The boy turned to her, smiling softly, and for a second, the world felt painfully fragile. As the car door closed, Elio glanced at her one last time. The look he gave her said everything thank you, and something darker, a promise she didn't know of. When the car pulled away, Violet stood alone by the river, soaked to the bone, her heart racing. The sound of the water filled her ears again, but now it felt different. It was colder, heavier. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried to shake off the feeling that her life had just shifted in a way she couldn't undo. Because deep down, she already knew the truth. Saving that boy had saved something in her too, but it had also cost her freedom. And somewhere in the distance, she could still feel Elio Rossi's gaze burning into her soul like a mark, a weird one she could never wash away. The morning light poured through the curtains, painting golden stripes across Violet's small apartment. She woke with a start, heart pounding, the sound of rushing water echoing in her head. For a brief moment, she thought she was still in the river, still fighting the current. Then her eyes adjusted to the calm stillness of her room. The air smelled faintly of sea salt from the damp clothes she had hung to dry the night before. The rescue, the boy, the man, Elio Rossi. She sat up slowly, pressing her palms against her temples. The memory of his voice lingered, deep and steady, wrapping around her thoughts like a chain. "You belong to me now." The words felt impossible, absurd, yet every time she replayed the scene, she could still feel the weight of his gaze, the quiet authority that seemed to make everyone else disappear. Violet shook her head as if to scatter the thought. It was over. She had saved a child, done her duty, and that was that. The man would forget about her soon enough. People like Elio Rossi lived in another world entirely. By noon, she was back at the beach, wearing her red lifeguard jacket and sunglasses, pretending everything was normal. But her calm facade cracked every time a dark car passed by on the nearby road. She told herself it was just nerves, that she was imagining things, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on her. As the sun began to set, she packed up her gear and started down the boardwalk toward home. The world felt strangely quieter than usual, the breeze colder. Then she noticed the car, black, polished, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. It was parked across the street from her building. Violet's steps faltered. A strange dread settled in her stomach. She forced herself to keep walking, pretending she didn't notice. But the moment she reached her door, she heard footsteps behind her. Not hurried, not threatening, just steady, certain. Her hand trembled as she fit the key into the lock. The door opened, and before she could step inside, a voice spoke from behind her. "Miss Stars." She froze. Slowly, she turned. A tall man stood there in a dark suit. He wasn't the one from the river, but he carried the same silent authority. His eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Rossi wishes to speak with you." Violet's pulse quickened. She forced out a shaky breath. "Tell him I'm busy." The man didn't move. His voice remained calm, polite even, but there was no mistaking the command beneath it. "He insists." For a moment, Violet considered running, but the thought barely formed before the man gestured toward the waiting car. It would be best not to make him wait. Her stomach twisted. Every instinct told her to refuse, to close the door and lock it. But deep down, she knew that men like Elio Rossi didn't take no for an answer. She followed him silently. The ride was quiet. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint murmur of the city outside. Violet kept her gaze fixed on the lights that blurred past the window, her reflection staring back at her like a stranger. When the car finally stopped, she realized they had driven far from the city center. Before her stood a sprawling estate, surrounded by iron gates and manicured gardens that gleamed under the moonlight. It was beautiful, but it didn't feel safe. The man opened the door for her. She hesitated, then stepped out. The air was heavy with the scent of roses and rain. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled from a fountain, its sound oddly soothing. The front doors opened, and Elio Rossi appeared. He looked different in the soft glow of the courtyard lights, less like a legend and more like a man, though no less intimidating. His sleeves were rolled up again, revealing the sharp lines of his forearms. His gaze met hers instantly. Violet tried to keep her voice steady. "Why am I here?" He didn't answer at first. He turned slightly, motioning for her to follow him inside. The entrance hall was breathtaking, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, walls adorned with paintings that looked centuries old. Everything screamed wealth and power. Yet beneath the beauty, Violet felt something colder, control. Elio stopped at the base of a grand staircase. Leo appeared at the top, smiling when he saw her. "Violet." He rushed down the steps, small feet barely touching the marble as he ran into her arms. She crouched, hugging him tightly. Relief flooded through her. He looked healthy, safe. Elio watched them quietly. Leo said she saved me again, he murmured. I had a bad dream last night, and she came back. Elio's gaze softened slightly, though his voice remained calm when he spoke. My son has not stopped talking about you. Violet straightened slowly, meeting his eyes. I was just doing my job. He studied her, his expression unreadable. My men tell me you work as a lifeguard. Yes. You saved lives for a living then. I try to. He stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away. You saved what was most precious to me. That is not something I forget. His tone was steady, but the air around them thickened. Violet crossed her arms, uneasy. I don't need repayment. I just need to go home. Elio's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. I did not bring you here to repay you. Then why am I here? He tilted his head, eyes locked on hers. Because you owe me. Violet blinked, disbelief flashing through her. Owe you? For what? For saving my son, he said simply. You took responsibility for his life. That means you have tied yours to ours. That's not how it works. He took another step closer, and though he wasn't touching her, she could feel the gravity of his presence. It is how it works with me. Violet's throat went dry. His voice was calm, but his words were a quiet declaration of power. She could feel the walls of his world closing in around her. You can't own people, she said softly. Elio's gaze darkened. In my world, everything has a price. The silence that followed stretched like a wire ready to snap. Leo tugged on her sleeve. Papa, can she stay for dinner? Violet looked down at him, startled. I should go, she murmured. Elio didn't move. You will stay. His words carried no anger, no force, but somehow they left no room for refusal. Dinner was held in a vast dining hall with a table long enough for 20 people, though only 3 seats were occupied. Leo chatted happily beside her, talking about school, his favorite games, the ocean. His laughter was bright, innocent, a stark contrast to the tension that clung to the room. Elio said little. He simply watched, his gaze lingering on her every time she spoke, as if trying to understand her. The flicker of candlelight reflected in his eyes, making them seem even darker. When the meal ended, Leo excused himself to play upstairs, leaving them alone. Violet stood. Thank you for dinner. I should leave now. Elio leaned back in his chair. You think you can walk away from me? Her pulse quickened. I didn't ask for this. No, but fate rarely asks for permission, so you are fate. She asked. No, but I'm the one it brought to you, he replied. The way he said it made something inside her twist. His voice carried conviction, like he truly believed the universe itself had placed her in his path. Elio rose slowly, his movement smooth and deliberate. You saved my blood, Miss Stars. In my world, that creates a bond that cannot be broken. Violet backed toward the door, her heart racing. I'm not part of your world. His eyes softened, but only slightly. Not yet. The room felt colder suddenly. She could hear the faint ticking of a clock somewhere in the distance. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost gentle. Go home tonight, but understand this. From the moment you pulled my son from that river, you became mine to protect. And I protect what is mine. She swallowed hard. His words echoed in her mind long after she left the mansion. Outside, the night was heavy with mist. The car door closed behind her, and as they drove away, Violet looked back through the window. Elio Rossi stood in the doorway, watching her leave, his expression unreadable. She turned away, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Her heart was still beating too fast. Somehow she knew this wasn't over. The current she had fought to escape yesterday had followed her onto land, and this time it wasn't water pulling her under. It was him. The week passed in a blur of unease. Violet tried to return to her normal rhythm, but nothing felt the same. Every wave she watched crash against the shore reminded her of the night she dove into the river. Every shadow she saw made her heart skip, as if expecting one of Elio's men to appear again. And they did. They never spoke, never interfered, but she could feel them. Men in dark suits watching from a distance, pretending to blend in with the crowd. At first, she told herself it was a coincidence. But the same black car parked across from her apartment every night told her otherwise. By the 5th day, her nerves were frayed. She tried to confront them once, but when she approached the car, it drove away before she could speak. The silence afterward was worse than the watching. That evening, after her shift, she came home to find a small white envelope slipped under her door. Her name was written across it in neat, bold handwriting. Inside there was a single piece of paper. Dinner. Tonight. 8. No address, no signature, but she didn't need one. Her first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend she hadn't seen it. But something about the neatness of the handwriting, the quiet certainty of the message, made her chest tighten. She wasn't being asked. She was being summoned. By 7:30, she was still pacing her small living room, torn between fear and something else, something she didn't want to name. At 8 o'clock sharp, there was a knock on the door. When she opened it, 2 men in suits stood there. One of them simply nodded and gestured toward the waiting car. Violet's throat was dry, but she stepped outside without a word. She told herself she was going because she wanted to make things clear, to set boundaries. But deep down, she knew the truth. Elio Rossi didn't summon people twice. The ride was silent, just like before. The car wound through the hills until the city lights disappeared, replaced by long stretches of darkness and the faint sound of the ocean. When the gates of the Rossi estate came into view again, Violet's pulse quickened. The mansion looked different this time. The lights were softer, the air warmer. The faint sound of piano music floated from inside, gentle and haunting. Elio met her at the entrance. He wasn't wearing a suit tonight. Instead, he wore a dark shirt, unbuttoned at the collar, and black trousers. The lack of formality made him even more dangerous somehow, like a predator pretending to be at ease. Violet stopped a few feet away from him. "You didn't have to send people to my home," she said quietly. He regarded her in silence for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You would not have come otherwise." "I might have." He looked at her, eyes steady, as if reading every thought she was trying to hide. "No, you would have tried to convince yourself to forget me, and I do not like being forgotten." His words sent a strange chill through her. He gestured toward the dining room. "Come." Violet hesitated but followed. The dining table was smaller tonight, set for 2. Candles flickered softly between crystal glasses, their flames reflecting in the polished silverware. The scent of rosemary and wine lingered in the air. She took a seat across from him, her movement slow, cautious. Elio poured wine into her glass himself, the gesture oddly personal. His every motion was deliberate, graceful, controlled. "You look better than the night I found you by the river," he said. Violet met his gaze. "I wasn't expecting to see you again. You expected I would let you go." The words were quiet, but they cut through the air. Violet straightened. "I don't belong in your world." Elio's lips curved slightly. "Yet here you are." She looked down at her plate, unsure of how to respond. The food in front of her looked exquisite, but her stomach was too tight to eat. For a few minutes they ate in silence. The only sounds were the clink of cutlery and the faint murmur of the piano from another room. Then Elio spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Do you like children?" The question caught her off guard. "I do. Leo talks about you often. He said you make him feel safe." Her chest warmed at that. "He's a sweet boy. He deserves to feel safe." Elio's eyes lingered on her. "You gave that to him." Violet hesitated. "He's your son. It's what any person would have done." "Not any person," Elio said quietly. "Most people see danger and turn away. You ran toward it." Violet forced a small smile. "That's what lifeguards do." He leaned back slightly. "And yet, you fear me." Her hand froze on the edge of her glass. He watched her closely, his gaze sharp. "You hid it well, but I can see it in your eyes. You are afraid." Violet took a slow breath. "You're a powerful man. People fear what they don't understand." He tilted his head, intrigued. "And what do you think you understand about me?" She met his gaze. "That you're used to getting what you want." The faintest smile touched his lips. "And if what I want is you?" Violet's heart skipped. She looked away, trying to steady her breathing. "This isn't about gratitude, is it?" she murmured. Elio's voice dropped lower. "Gratitude fades. I do not." The air between them thickened. For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension was heavy, electric, charged with something unspoken. Then Violet pushed her plate away and stood. "I should go." Elio rose as well. "You walk away too easily, Miss Stars." She shook her head. "I'm not a piece on your chessboard." He stepped closer, the light catching the sharp lines of his face. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "I do not play games. When I choose something, I keep it." Violet took a step back, her pulse racing. "You can't just decide that about people." He studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Tell me, Violet, why are you trembling if you don't feel something too?" She froze. His words hit something deep inside her, a truth she didn't want to admit. There was fear, yes, but beneath it, a pull she couldn't explain. Elio took another step closer. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, but he stopped short, his fingers hovering inches from her skin. For a second, his eyes softened. Then he turned away, breaking the spell. "You may go," he said quietly, "but you will return." Violet didn't wait. She turned and left the room, her heart hammering in her chest. Outside, the night air felt like a release. She climbed into the waiting car, refusing to look back this time. But as the gates closed behind her, she could still feel him watching, even from miles away. When she reached her apartment, the city felt smaller, quieter. She sat on her bed, staring at her hands. They were still trembling. She didn't know what scared her more, the thought of Elio Rossi claiming her as his, or the part of her that didn't want to run anymore. Because in the silence of her empty apartment, one thought refused to leave her mind. She wasn't done with him. And deep down, she knew neither was he. Violet woke before dawn, her heart pounding as though it had been racing all night. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the unease to fade. But it didn't. It had been 3 days since the dinner at Elio's mansion, yet the weight of his gaze still clung to her like smoke. She tried to convince herself that life could go back to normal, that she could return to the beach and forget about the man with eyes like storms. But the truth was impossible to ignore. Ever since she met him, something had shifted inside her. His presence haunted her dreams. His voice, calm yet commanding, echoed in her thoughts. When she walked out of her apartment later that morning, the world felt different. The usual chatter of the street seemed distant, muffled, as if she were moving underwater. She slung her bag over her shoulder and started toward the beach. Halfway down the block, she noticed a black car parked near the corner. The windows were tinted too dark to see through, but she felt it. The eyes watching her. Her steps quickened. By the time she reached the boardwalk, she could no longer pretend she was imagining things. The same car had followed her twice in the last 2 days. Each time she turned a corner, it appeared again. Violet tried to shake the feeling off. She stayed late at the lifeguard station, hoping that being around people would ease her nerves. But when the sun began to set, she finally gave up and went home. The elevator was out of order again, so she climbed the stairs to her floor, her muscles aching from the long day. As she reached her door, a soft sound made her pause, the faint scrape of a shoe behind her. She turned sharply. No one was there. She fumbled for her keys, her hands trembling slightly. The lock clicked, and she pushed the door open. The lights were off, but something felt wrong. The air was heavy, still. She flicked the switch, and her heart stopped. A single white envelope lay on the floor just inside the door. Her name was written across it in neat black ink. She hesitated, then picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 5 words were typed in the center. "Stay away from Elio Rossi." For a moment she could only stare at the message, her pulse hammering in her ears. Then she dropped the paper and backed away, her breath catching. She wasn't imagining things. Someone was watching her, someone who knew about him. The fear that had been simmering in the back of her mind finally broke through. She locked the door, drew the curtains, and sank onto the couch. Her phone buzzed on the table, making her jump. A message. Unknown number. "Are you safe?" Her throat went dry. She typed slowly. "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "It's Elio. Answer me." She exhaled shakily. Somehow he always seemed to know. "I'm fine," she wrote, "but someone left a note at my door." A pause. Then his response came, sharp and direct. "Do not leave your apartment. I'm sending someone." Her stomach knotted. She was scared, even too scared to refuse like she would normally. The message ended there. She set her phone down and buried her face in her hands. Every part of her wanted to scream at him, to tell him to stop controlling her, to let her live her life. But fear had replaced anger now, the kind of fear that crept beneath the skin and stayed there. A knock echoed through the apartment. She froze. 3 slow knocks. She didn't move. Another set followed, louder this time. "Violet Stars," a man's voice said from the other side. "Mr. Rossi sent us." Her hand hovered over the lock. Every instinct told her not to open the door, yet she found herself turning the handle. 2 men stood in the hallway, both wearing black suits. Their eyes were cold, professional. "Mr. Rossi instructed us to stay here until further notice," one of them said. "You'll be safe now." Safe. The word felt hollow. She nodded, though her chest was tight. They stationed themselves outside her door, silent as statues. She sat on the couch, hugging her knees, the tension in her shoulders refusing to fade. Hours passed. She drifted in and out of uneasy sleep until a loud crash jolted her awake. The sound came from the hallway. The next instant, gunfire erupted. The 2 men outside shouted something she couldn't make out. She grabbed her phone, heart thundering, and scrambled toward the back of the apartment. Before she could dial, the door burst open. A masked man stepped inside. Violet gasped and stumbled backward. He moved fast, grabbing her arm before she could run. "Don't scream," he hissed. "We're not here to hurt you. We're sending a message." She twisted against his grip, trying to pull free. "Let go of me!" He tightened his hold. "Tell Rossi to back off his business on the docks, or next time it won't just be a message." Panic shot through her veins. She kicked at him, her foot connecting with his knee. He cursed, losing balance, and she bolted toward the door. Another man blocked her path. Then a gunshot split the air. Both intruders froze. A figure stood in the doorway, tall and unflinching, the muzzle of a gun still smoking. Elio Rossi. His eyes were darker than she had ever seen them. The two men moved at once, but Elio was faster. Another shot rang out. One of them fell, clutching his shoulder. The other dropped his weapon and raised his hands, backing away. Elio stepped forward slowly, his gaze never wavering. "You made a mistake coming here." The man's voice shook. "We were just delivering a message." Elio silenced him with a single shot. The room fell into silence except for Violet's rapid breathing. The scent of gunpowder filled the air. Elio lowered his weapon, turning toward her. The fury in his eyes softened slightly when he saw her trembling. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak. He crossed the room in 2 strides and took her face in his hands. "You should have told me sooner," he said quietly. "I warned you this could happen." Tears welled in her eyes. "You can't keep doing this. You can't keep controlling everything." His jaw tightened. "You think this is control? This is survival." She tried to pull away, but his hand stayed firm, not rough, just immovable. "You live in a world where everything you love is a target," he said. "You saved my son. That means you are part of that world now, whether you want it or not." Violet closed her eyes. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said softly. "But you have it anyway." He released her then and turned toward the bodies on the floor. One of his men appeared at the door, giving a brief nod before dragging the unconscious intruder away. Elio faced her again. "You'll come with me tonight. You'll stay where I can keep you safe." She opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. She looked around the wrecked apartment, the shattered glass, the blood on the tiles, the fear still clinging to the air, and knew he was right. Elio extended his hand. "Violet." For a moment she hesitated, then slowly she took it. He led her out into the night, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. She didn't know where he was taking her, only that her life would never be the same again. As the car door closed behind her and the engine started, Violet glanced at him. He sat beside her in silence, his profile calm and unreadable. But when she caught his reflection in the window, she saw it. The storm in his eyes, the same one she had seen that first night on the beach, and for the first time she understood the truth. Elio Rossi was not just a man protecting what he cared about. He was a man who would burn the world for it, and now she was part of that fire. Violet woke to the soft hum of an engine. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then the scent of leather and cologne hit her, and everything came rushing back: the attack, the gunshots, Elio's hand pulling her out of the apartment. She turned her head. Elio sat beside her in the dim light of the car, his gaze fixed out the window. His expression was unreadable, calm, yet heavy with thought. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. His eyes flicked toward her. "Somewhere safer." She wanted to argue, to say she didn't belong anywhere near him or his dangerous world, but the words never made it past her lips. The way he said safer made it sound final, as if there was no safety outside his reach. The car rolled to a stop before tall black gates guarded by armed men. Beyond them stood a sprawling estate, more a fortress than a home. The gates opened silently, and they drove through. The mansion loomed ahead, its marble pillars gleaming faintly under the moonlight. When the car stopped, Elio stepped out first, and extended his hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His palm was warm, strong, and grounding. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and faint cigar smoke. The grand foyer stretched upward into a chandelier that glittered like falling stars. Paintings lined the walls, not cheerful landscapes, but portraits of powerful men, each with the same sharp Italian features and dark eyes. Violet glanced around. "This is your home?" "It is my world," Elio replied. "Home is too gentle a word." He led her through a hall filled with hushed voices and purposeful footsteps. Everywhere she looked, men moved with quiet discipline, speaking in low tones. She caught the glint of hidden weapons beneath their jackets. Every one of them bowed their heads slightly as Elio passed. "Do they all work for you?" she asked. "They work for my family," he said. "And now they protect you too." The words made her chest tighten. "I didn't ask for protection." He stopped walking and turned to her. "And yet, you need it." Violet met his gaze, defiant but shaken. "You're making it sound like I'm your prisoner." Elio's eyes softened slightly, though the power in them never faded. "A prisoner is kept in chains. You are not. You can walk wherever you wish within these walls, but outside them, the people who came for you will return. You think I exaggerate, but they will not stop. You are a message now." She looked away. "Because of you." "Yes," he said simply. "Because of me." They resumed walking in silence until they reached a long corridor that opened into a private dining room. A fire crackled in the corner, casting golden light over the room's dark wood and velvet chairs. A single place setting had been prepared at one end of the table. Elio gestured for her to sit. "I don't want to eat," she said. "Eat anyway," he replied. "You haven't slept or eaten properly since the attack." She hesitated, then sat. He took the seat opposite her, his movements calm and deliberate. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken questions. After a while she asked softly, "Why do you care what happens to me?" Elio leaned back in his chair. "You saved my son. You brought him back from the river when he was slipping away. That kind of debt cannot be paid with words." "That doesn't mean I belong to you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. He studied her quietly, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "You still think this is about possession," he said. "It is not. It is about balance. In my world, when someone saves what is mine, they become part of my life. It is the only way to keep them safe." Violet frowned. "Safe or under your control?" Elio's jaw tightened. "In my world, they are the same thing." She pushed back from the table and stood. "You can't just decide that for me." He rose too, slowly, his presence filling the room. "You think this is a choice, Violet? You think you can step into my world, touch my son's life, and walk away untouched? That is not how it works." Her pulse raced, but she refused to look away, and "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," he said softly, "but it found you." The tension between them was thick enough to taste. For a long moment neither spoke. The sound of the fire filled the silence. Then Elio stepped closer, his voice lower now. "You fear me." "I don't fear you," she said, though her heartbeat betrayed her. He tilted his head slightly. "Then why are your hands trembling?" She looked down. They were. "I don't know what you want from me," she whispered. "I want you to stop pretending you don't feel this," he said. "The pull between us. The reason you keep looking for excuses to run, when what you really want is to understand me." Violet's breath caught. "You're wrong." "Am I?" His eyes searched hers, and something in his gaze softened. "You think I don't see it?" The part of you that wonders who I am when the world isn't watching. You want to hate me, but you can't." She turned away, her pulse pounding. "You live in a world of violence, Elio. Everything about you screams danger." He moved closer, his voice a whisper near her ear. "And yet you are still here." Violet's body went still. The warmth of his breath brushed her skin, and for a heartbeat she forgot to breathe. Then she stepped back, forcing distance between them. "You're impossible." He smiled faintly, though his eyes remained serious. "You will learn, Violet. In this world, power is the only language anyone listens to, and I intend to teach you how to speak it." Her eyes widened. "I don't want to be part of your world." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You already are." She sank back into her chair, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. For the first time she saw beyond the charm, saw the man who had built an empire from nothing, who ruled it through loyalty and fear. Everything about him was controlled, deliberate, dangerous. And yet, beneath that steel, there was something else, something raw and human that only appeared when he looked at her. Later that night, Elio led her through the mansion's courtyard. The moonlight cast silver on the marble fountains, the air cool against her skin. He stopped near the edge of a vast garden and gestured toward the horizon. "My father built all of this," he said quietly. "He believed control was the only way to survive. I used to hate him for it. Now I understand." Violet glanced at him. "You think control makes you strong?" "It makes me alive," he said. "Without it, everything collapses." "And what about love?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Where does that fit into your control?" He turned to her slowly. "Love is control," he said, "but it is also surrender. You will understand that one day." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't know if it was fear or something deeper. As they walked back inside, she realized how dangerous it was to be near him, not just because of who he was, but because of what he made her feel. She had built her life around strength and independence, yet here she was standing beside a man who could command armies with a word, and her heart was betraying her. When they reached her room, he paused at the door. "You will stay here until I say otherwise," he said softly. "No one will enter without my permission." She nodded, unable to speak. He lingered a moment longer, his eyes meeting hers. "Sleep, Violet. You are safe here." As he turned to leave, she whispered, "Am I?" He didn't answer. The door closed behind him, leaving her alone in the quiet glow of the room. Violet sank onto the bed, staring at the shadows on the wall. Safe. The word echoed in her mind, but she knew better now. Safety in Elio's world was an illusion, one that came wrapped in silk and sealed with fire. And as she closed her eyes, she realized something terrifying. Part of her didn't want to be free. The rain came without warning that night, heavy and relentless, blurring the world into streaks of silver. Violet stood on her balcony, arms wrapped around herself, the chill of the wind cutting through her thin sweater. The city stretched beneath her, alive with the hum of distant sirens and flickering lights, but all she could hear was the echo of Elio's words. "You belong here now." The phrase had followed her into her dreams, into her every quiet moment, refusing to let her go. It had been days since she last saw him. His men still lingered near her apartment, silent figures that came and went like shadows. They never spoke to her, but she always felt their presence, watching, guarding, or maybe controlling. She told herself she should feel safe, that Elio was protecting her, but safety had never felt this much like a cage. She turned away from the rain and moved back inside. Her small apartment felt even smaller now, every corner carrying a trace of him. His voice, his gaze, his impossible calm. She wanted to erase him from her thoughts. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face in the glow of the mansion lights, the way he had looked at her after the confrontation, as if she had become the one thing in his world that did not follow his rules. The sound came softly at first, like a whisper. Then it grew louder. A knock. Not the careful knock of Elio's men, but a hurried one, sharp and uneven. Her pulse quickened. She stepped closer to the door, her hand hovering over the handle. "Who is it?" she asked, though the words came out barely audible. Silence. Her throat tightened. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was one of the neighbors. But before she could step back, the door burst open. 2 men pushed their way inside, their faces hidden beneath dark caps. One grabbed her wrist while the other covered her mouth. The struggle was fast, brutal, over before she could scream. A sharp sting at her neck. Darkness swallowed her whole. When Violet woke, her head was pounding. The air smelled of gasoline and damp metal. She was in a moving vehicle, the rumble beneath her confirming it. Her hands were tied, her mouth gagged. Panic rose like fire in her chest. She tried to steady her breathing, tried to think, but the world was spinning too fast. She forced herself to look around. Through the dim light, she saw 2 men in the front seat, whispering in a language she didn't recognize. The road outside flashed by in streaks of gray and green. Wherever they were taking her, it was far from the city. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what Elio had said. "There are men who think they can use you to get to me." Now she understood. They weren't after her. She was bait. The car slowed after what felt like hours. When it stopped, rough hands pulled her out. Her feet stumbled against gravel. They led her through a narrow path into an abandoned warehouse. The air inside was cold and smelled of rust. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering as she was pushed onto a chair. One of the men tore off her gag and spoke in a low, mocking tone. "You must be the reason the mighty Elio Rossi has lost his sleep." She said nothing. Her throat was dry, her mind racing. Another man stepped closer, his face half hidden in shadow. "You think he will come for you? You think you mean that much to him?" Violet wanted to believe he would, but a sliver of doubt slipped through her resolve. Elio was a man of power, not of mercy. What if she was just another name in his long list of possessions? Still, something deep within her whispered otherwise. He had looked at her as if she was not just another woman who had crossed his path. His silence, his watchful gaze, the way he had shielded her even when she defied him. There had been something real there, something neither of them could name. The men moved to the corner, arguing quietly. Violet used the moment to tug at the ropes around her wrists. Her pulse raced as the fibers loosened slightly. Not enough to break free, but enough to give her hope. Then a sound cut through the silence. A car outside, then another, then the echo of footsteps, many footsteps. The men froze. Violet's breath caught. The warehouse door slammed open. Everything that followed happened in chaos. Shadows moved fast, silent and sure. Gunfire erupted, flashes of light cutting through the dark. The 2 men who had taken her fell before they could even reach for their weapons. Then he appeared. Elio stepped into the room like a storm wearing human form. His expression was unreadable, his eyes glacial calm against the violence around him. He didn't speak, didn't look at the bodies, only at her. The world seemed to tilt. He crossed the distance in long strides and untied her hands himself. The moment the ropes fell, Violet could feel the tremor in her fingers. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch careful, almost gentle. "You are hurt," he said softly. His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed something else. Fear, not for himself, but for her. She shook her head, tears filling her eyes, though she didn't know if they were from pain or relief. "They wanted to use you," he said. I told them once that touching what is mine is a mistake. They will not make it again. His words should have frightened her, but all she could feel was the weight of his sincerity. He had come for her, personally. As they stepped outside, she saw the scale of it. Cars lined the narrow road, headlights cutting through the mist. Men in dark suits moved with precision, checking the perimeter, but Elio ignored them all, leading her to the car himself. Inside, the silence pressed close. The sound of rain against the windows filled the space between them. Violet finally found her voice. "Why did you come yourself? You could have sent anyone." Elio's gaze stayed on the road ahead, because they took what is mine. She turned to look at him, studying his profile in the faint light. There was no arrogance in his tone, no pride, just truth, plain and heavy. She wanted to tell him she was not his, that she belonged to no one, but the words caught in her throat, because somewhere deep inside, she wasn't sure that was still true. The car drove for what felt like hours until they reached the mansion. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and heavy. Elio opened the door for her and followed her inside. The house was silent, its vastness echoing with the storm's aftermath. He turned to her once they were alone in the hall. "I told you before that this world will not let you go. Tonight was proof." Violet met his gaze, her voice trembling. "And what happens now?" Elio's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "Now," he said, "you stay where I can protect you." The words should have sounded like a command. Instead, they felt like a promise. Violet hesitated, torn between the instinct to run and the strange safety she felt in his presence. But then Leo appeared at the top of the stairs, his small face lighting up when he saw her. "You are back," he said, running to her. He threw his arms around her legs, and she felt her heart melt. She knelt down, hugging him tightly. When she looked up, Elio was watching them, something unspoken passing between them. A fragile thread connecting three souls who had no right to belong together, yet somehow did. That was when she noticed it. A faint cut along Elio's temple, blood still drying. He had been in the fight. He had bled for her. Violet rose slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "You risked your life for me." Elio looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I would risk everything." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For the first time, Violet didn't look away. The fear was still there, but so was something else, something dangerously close to love. And though she didn't say it, she knew the truth now. Elio Rossi was no longer just the man who claimed her. He was the man who had saved her, the man who would burn the world to keep her safe. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady, washing away the blood on the stones. Inside the mansion, Violet stood in the quiet, with the man who had become both her captor and her savior, and she realized that escape was no longer what she wanted. It was him. The first time Elio heard that Violet was gone, the world seemed to pause. His hands clenched around the edge of the desk as the words reached him, soft and deliberate, carried by one of his most trusted men. Someone took her. No details, no explanation, just those 4 words, and the air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing down on him. He stood without moving, letting the silence stretch. Outside the windows, the city carried on an indifferent rhythm, lights flickering against the dark, unaware of the storm that had just erupted inside the mansion. He did not speak. He did not ask questions yet. He only felt the tight coil of something unfamiliar winding inside him, the first hints of panic that he rarely allowed himself to notice. The usual commands and orders that could bend the city to his will, felt useless now. Violet was not an asset. She was not a tool. She was a part of his life that had appeared without permission and now had been wrenched away. His chest tightened with the weight of the realization. Elio moved, not quickly, but with intent, through the house. His men noticed the shift, the sharpness in his posture, the way his gaze cut through the room, assessing and calculating at once. They had seen him in anger, in negotiation, in triumph, but this was different. This was fear, wrapped in control, a storm tempered only by discipline. He called quietly to one of his men, a simple gesture that carried volumes. "Everything begins immediately," he said without raising his voice, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. The man understood and left the room, slipping into the shadows of the hall. Elio moved to the windows, pressing his palms against the cold glass, staring down at the streets below. The city spread before him, alive, sprawling, chaotic. Somewhere in that chaos, Violet was moving against her will. Someone had dared to cross him. Someone had dared to touch what belonged to him. He walked through the hall, steady steps echoing off the marble as his mind measured every possibility, every outcome, every route that could have led to her. The calm that usually anchored him wavered. The uncertainty was unbearable. He had built his life on knowing everything, controlling everything, seeing every piece of the game before it unfolded. But Violet's disappearance was a move he had not anticipated. Elio's men returned with updates, each small detail adding pieces to the puzzle, but nothing that revealed her location. He listened, each word recorded and discarded, analyzing the tone of the voices, the hesitation in the facts. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was finding her. He left the mansion, moving through the night with precision, slipping into the city streets with the quiet authority that marked him. No one stopped him. No one dared. He followed instincts honed over years, tracing the threads that led to her. Every sound, every shadow, every hint of movement could be a clue. Every second was a lifetime. The streets were slick with rain, reflecting the orange glow of the lamps above. He moved with careful calculation, his gaze sharp, his senses alive to everything around him. The air was thick with mist, cold against his skin, making him aware of every step, every shadow that shifted in the corners of his eyes. Somewhere, he told himself, she was waiting for him. Somewhere, someone had underestimated how far he would go. Hours passed, the city blurring around him. Each intersection, each alley, each abandoned building became a possibility. He did not tire. He did not slow. The idea that she could be harmed, even in the smallest way, pushed him faster, made his movements sharper. His mind refused to rest. Every noise was analyzed, every flicker of movement measured. He imagined her heartbeat in the dark, fragile and alive, and it drove him forward. Then a detail, a trace, a whisper of something out of place, a name dropped by someone who thought he was far away, too far away to notice. The clue was small, almost insignificant, but it was enough. It was enough to direct him to the edge of the city, to a place where the streets narrowed and the lights dimmed. He paused at the corner, listening. The smell of wet stone and dust filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of smoke. There was movement ahead, voices carried faintly by the wind. Elio did not hesitate. He moved forward, careful, deliberate, as if the air itself would betray him. Every step brought him closer to her. Every breath filled with anticipation and tension. At the entrance to a narrow courtyard, he stopped again. The scent of damp stone and rust hung in the air. He crouched, eyes scanning, body coiled, ready. The moment stretched, heavy and electric. He could feel it before he saw it. She was close. Then a figure appeared in the shadows. Small, cautious, fragile. His chest tightened. It was her. Violet. She froze when she saw him, a mixture of fear and relief flooding her face. She tried to move, to run toward him, but the ropes that had bound her were still around her wrists. His hands reached for hers, working quickly, removing them, steadying her. She did not speak. She did not need to. The relief in her eyes said everything. Elio pulled her close, not letting go. The city around them faded. All that existed was the pulse of her heartbeat against his chest, the steady rhythm that confirmed she was safe, for now. "You are here," he said quietly, though the words were unnecessary. He could feel her trembling. It was not anger or frustration that made his body tense. It was the raw, unfiltered emotion of knowing she had been at risk and that he had found her. She looked up at him, fear still in her eyes, but mixed with something else. Gratitude, awe, something unnameable. Her voice came, soft but steady. "You found me." Elio's gaze did not waver. "I will always find you. No one touches what belongs to me." The words carried weight, finality, promise. She realized then that he would move through anything, break through anything, to protect her. That knowledge brought relief, but also a tightening sense of reality. Her life had changed. Her safety was now tied to him, to the world he controlled. Elio's grip on her hand tightened ever so slightly, a silent promise that he would not fail her. And Violet, despite the fear still lingering in her chest, understood one thing clearly. No one would ever take her from him. Not now, not ever. They began moving through the narrow streets together, the night air cool and heavy around them. Every sound made them pause, every shadow a possible threat. Yet Elio's presence was a shield, unwavering, a reminder that no danger could reach her while he was near. The city stretched before them, endless and unknowable. But in that moment, surrounded by shadows and silent streets, the two of them moved forward together, bound by a force neither could ignore, and the knowledge that the game had only just begun. The safe house was a fortress of shadows, tucked away in the labyrinthine underbelly of the city, where the hum of distant traffic blended with the occasional drip of water from cracked pipes overhead. Its walls, thick and unyielding, echoed the night that had stretched endlessly outside, a night fraught with chaos and near misses that still clung to Violet like a second skin. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, its thin mattress sagging under her weight, her hands resting in her lap, still trembling slightly from the events of the day. The coarse ropes that had bound her wrists were gone now, discarded in some forgotten corner of the room, but the memory of their restraint lingered, a phantom burn against her skin, a stark reminder that the world she had known, so careful and contained, had shattered irreparably the moment she had rescued Leo. Leo. The boy's name echoed in her mind like a talisman. Elio's younger brother, innocent and wide-eyed, caught in the crossfire of a rival gang's vendetta. Violet hadn't planned to intervene. She was just a bystander, a florist with a quiet life arranging bouquets for weddings and funerals. But seeing the child huddled in that alley, terror in his eyes as armed men closed in, had ignited something primal within her. She'd grabbed him, hidden him in her shop's back room, and called the only number she knew might help, the one whispered in underground circles as belonging to Elio Rossi, the enigmatic kingpin who ruled the city's shadows with an iron fist. That single act of compassion had pulled her into a vortex of danger, transforming her from an ordinary woman into a target, a pawn in a game she barely understood. Elio did not speak at first. He stood near the grimy window, his silhouette tall and unyielding against the faint glow of neon signs flickering from the streets below. Even in this quiet moment, he carried the weight of command, the subtle tension in his broad shoulders that made people move at his direction without a word. His dark hair was tousled from the frantic rescue, a few strands falling over his forehead, and his jaw was set in a line that spoke of restrained fury. But tonight, even his posture had softened slightly, the edges of his control dimmed by the raw fear of what could have happened to her. He had stormed the warehouse where she'd been held, his men cutting through the guards like a scythe through wheat, his voice a thunderous roar as he demanded her release. Now, in the aftermath, he scanned the city streets that stretched far below, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The patrol cars weaving through traffic, the pedestrians hurrying home, the ever-present threat of retaliation. Violet looked at him, trying to read what he felt beneath that impenetrable facade, but he was impossible to decipher. The man who ruled the city with precision and fear-brokering deals in smoke-filled backrooms, eliminating threats with a single nod, was now vulnerable in ways she had never imagined. She had glimpsed it earlier, in the way his hands had shaken ever so slightly as he untied her, in the hoarse whisper of her name when he pulled her into his arms amid the gunfire. He had always been a force, unyielding and magnetic, drawing people into his orbit with a charisma laced with danger. But now she saw the subtle cracks, the flickers of something deeper and far more personal. A man who had lost too much, who guarded his heart as fiercely as his empire. She tried to speak, to break the heavy silence that blanketed the room like fog, but the words caught in her throat, tangled in the storm of emotions swirling inside her fear, relief, and something heavier, more insistent, that pressed against her chest like a hand over her heart. How could she explain it? The terror of being kidnapped, blindfolded and dragged into that cold warehouse, the threats hissed in her ear by men who saw her as leverage against Elio. And yet, amid the panic, she had never felt safer than she did in his presence. He had found her, fought to reach her with a ferocity that bordered on madness, and now she could not escape the truth that he would never let her go. Not out of possession alone, but because she had become woven into the fabric of his world, a thread he couldn't afford to lose. Elio turned from the window, his dark eyes finally settling on her. The intensity of his gaze made her heart beat faster, a wild rhythm that echoed in her ears, drowning out the distant sirens. It was not anger or fury that she saw there, not the cold calculation she'd witnessed in their first encounters. It was ownership, yes, but laced with protection, something absolute and unshakable. She felt the weight of it pressing down on her, undeniable and unyielding, like gravity pulling her toward him. In that moment, Violet realized there was no more resisting. The life she had known before him, the quiet mornings in her flower shop, the evenings spent sketching petals under soft lamplight, was gone, evaporated like mist in the sun. Her freedom had been replaced by a connection she could not deny, a bond forged through danger and desperation. She had saved Leo, pulling him from the jaws of death, and in doing so, she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She belonged now to a world that demanded loyalty and presence, a realm of whispered alliances and midnight vendettas, and she understood with a clarity that both terrified and exhilarated her that her place was at Elio's side. He moved closer, slow and deliberate, his footsteps soft on the worn wooden floor, giving her space, yet claiming it all at once. There was no question in his stance, no hesitation in his approach. He was a man accustomed to taking what was his, but tonight there was a tenderness in his movements, a restraint born of the fear he'd nearly lost her. He stopped just inches away, his presence filling the room, the faint scent of his cologne sandalwood and smoke mingling with the musty air of the safe house. Violet could see the faint scar along his collarbone, peeking from beneath his unbuttoned shirt, a remnant of some long-ago battle. She wondered how many such marks he carried, how many close calls had shaped him into this unyielding force. Violet lifted her eyes to meet his, searching for softness, for a sign of compassion beneath the intensity that burned like embers. She found it, though tempered with an iron certainty that made her breath hitch. He was her protector, her keeper, and now the one force she could not resist. She swallowed hard, accepting the reality of the bond that had been forged by fear, by courage, and by the moments that had defined their connection. The frantic phone call after saving Leo, the first time Elio had appeared at her door, his eyes dark with gratitude and something more. The nights they'd spent talking in hushed tones, sharing fragments of their lives amid the chaos. Elio extended his hand, not asking, only offering a gesture that spoke volumes in its simplicity. Violet took it, letting herself feel the steady strength in his grip, the calluses on his palms from years of handling power in all its forms. She felt the pulse of his presence, unrelenting and protective, thrumming through his veins like a current. In that touch, she knew that no force in the city, no rival gang with their arsenals and ambitions, no enemy lurking in the shadows, could reach her while he was near. This was the world she had entered unwittingly, a labyrinth of loyalty and betrayal. And for all its peril, she found an unexpected certainty in it, a sense of belonging that her old life had never provided. They moved together to the window, looking out over the city that sprawled beneath them, a glittering tapestry of lights flickering like distant stars against the velvet night. The rain had stopped hours ago, leaving the streets slick and reflective, but the air was still charged with possibility and threat alike, the kind of tension that kept men like Elio ever vigilant. Violet realized then that she was not just part of Elio's world. She was part of his life, his decisions, his future. The boy she'd saved was his blood, and in protecting Leo, she had protected a piece of Elio himself. With that realization came both fear and a gnawing worry about the dangers ahead and clarity, a sharp understanding that this was where she was meant to be. He spoke then, low and deliberate, his voice a rumble that vibrated through her chest, carrying more weight than anything he had said before. "You are mine," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "The world can try to take you, but it will fail. You are here, with me, and no one can change that." Violet's breath caught, the finality of the declaration settling in her chest like an anchor. She could feel the truth of it in every line of his body, in every measured movement, in the subtle, undeniable energy that surrounded him like an aura. She had resisted at first, fought against the pull with every fiber of her being, fleeing from his advances, questioning his motives, hoping for an escape back to her simple existence. But now she knew there was no going back. The bond between them was absolute, a chain forged in the heat of crisis, unbreakable and all-consuming. She was his, and he would not let go, not out of tyranny, but out of a fierce, possessive love that had bloomed in the unlikeliest of soils. A quiet resolve settled in her, the tension of fear giving way to acceptance, like a storm cloud parting to reveal the sun. She would not fight what was already written in their connection, etched into their shared glances and stolen moments. She would stand by him, not out of obligation or coercion, but because a part of her had chosen it, had felt the spark ignite when their eyes first met, They had accepted the inevitable pull. Love, in its complicated, dangerous, thrilling form, had found its place between them, and it was unbreakable, a force as powerful as the empire he commanded. The city around them remained unaware, indifferent to the bonds being forged in the shadows above its bustling streets, where deals were made and lives were traded like currency. Violet leaned slightly into Elio, letting herself feel the gravity of the man beside her, the force that had claimed her without question or apology. She no longer felt trapped or powerless. Instead, she felt present, alive, and fully aware of the role she now played in a life that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The florist who arranged delicate blooms had become the woman who stood amid thorns, unafraid. Elio's hand tightened slightly around hers, a silent affirmation, a promise made without ceremony or fanfare, as binding as any vow. She met his gaze, steady and unflinching, and they shared a quiet understanding, an unspoken pact that transcended words. Their world was dangerous, riddled with betrayals and bloodshed, their connection unyielding, a lifeline in the storm, and the path ahead uncertain, fraught with rivals who would stop at nothing to dismantle Elio's reign. But in that moment, acceptance brought strength, a fortitude she hadn't known she possessed. She belonged to him, and he would never allow anything to take her away, not the shadows that hunted them, not the ghosts of his past, not even her own lingering doubts. The night stretched on, still and watchful, carrying with it the unspoken reality that their lives were now entwined in a way that neither could undo, a tapestry woven from threads of fate and choice. Violet had surrendered, not in fear or defeat, but in recognition of the bond that had been forged through courage, desperation, and devotion. And Elio, for all his power and control, had found someone whose presence had reshaped him in ways even he could not have predicted, softening his edges, igniting a protectiveness that burned brighter than any vendetta. Together they stood above the sleeping city, hand in hand, the cool night air brushing against their skin like a benediction. The world below pulsed with life, oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding in the safe house above. Knowing that the acceptance of this truth was not the end, but the beginning of everything, a shared future built on the ruins of their separate pasts, resilient and unbreakable. The city was quiet, almost deceptively calm, a sprawling metropolis that pulsed with hidden life beneath its veneer of stillness. Skyscrapers loomed like silent guardians, their glass facades reflecting the scattered lights of street lamps and distant windows, casting elongated shadows that danced across rain-slicked pavements. The night air carried a tension that made every movement feel heavier, every shadow more dangerous, as if the very atmosphere were charged with unspoken threats. Elio and Violet stood together in the heart of his mansion, a sprawling estate perched on the outskirts of the urban chaos, its marble floors and towering ceilings a testament to the power he wielded. The weight of what had happened pressed on them both. The kidnappings, the betrayals, the relentless pull of a world built on power and fear. But now the ultimate test had arrived, one that could change everything, forcing them to confront not just external dangers but the depths of their own hearts. Elio's eyes never left her, dark and piercing, like polished obsidian that absorbed the dim light from the crystal chandelier overhead. His presence was commanding, unyielding, the same force that had drawn her into his world from the very beginning. He stood tall, his broad shoulders straining against the tailored fabric of his black shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and faint scars from battles long past. And now, more than ever, he radiated intensity, a magnetic energy that seemed to bend the room around him, pulling Violet inexorably closer. She felt it in her chest, a warmth that spread like wildfire in the way her heartbeat quickened to match the rhythm of his breathing, in the tremor that ran through her hands as she clasped them together to steady herself. She was aware, acutely and inescapably, that her life, her choices, and her heart had come to rest in his grasp, a surrender that both terrified and exhilarated her. Violet's mind raced back to how it all began, those fateful months ago when she was just an ordinary woman navigating the city's undercurrents as a journalist investigating corruption. She had stumbled upon Elio's empire by accident, or perhaps fate, uncovering layers of intrigue that led her straight to his doorstep. At first, he had been an enigma, a shadow figure whispered about in hushed tones. The mafia lord who controlled the ports, the underground markets, and the loyalties of countless men. Their first encounter had been charged with danger. She remembered the cold steel of his gaze as he cornered her in a dimly lit warehouse, demanding to know what she sought. But beneath the threat there had been a spark, an undeniable connection that neither could ignore. He had spared her, protected her from his own rivals, and in return she had become entangled in his web, saving his life during a botched assassination attempt that left her with a scar on her shoulder, a permanent reminder of the night she chose loyalty over escape. A subtle sound reached them from outside the mansion, a warning carried by instinct rather than knowledge. The faint crunch of gravel under tires, perhaps, or the low hum of an approaching vehicle slicing through the silence. Elio's body tightened, a predator sensing movement beyond sight, his jaw clenching as he scanned the darkened windows. Violet felt a shiver run down her spine, cold and insistent, raising goosebumps on her arms despite the warmth of the room. She understood without words that danger was near, more immediate than before, a culmination of the vendettas that had been brewing since Elio's rise to power. Rivals from the old families, envious of his control, had been circling like vultures, and tonight felt like the precipice of their assault. This night could demand everything from them: blood, sacrifice, perhaps even their lives. But in the midst of it, Violet found herself anchored by Elio's presence. Elio turned his gaze to her, the dark intensity softening only slightly, a flicker of vulnerability that he reserved solely for her. "This is your choice," he said, his voice low and deliberate, resonating with the gravelly timbre that sent shivers through her every time. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, as he stepped closer, the scent of his cologne sandalwood and leather enveloping her. "You can step away, walk into a life you think is safe, or you can stay. Stay with me, stay in my world, stand beside me." His hand hovered near her cheek, not quite touching, as if giving her the space to decide, though his eyes betrayed the desperation he felt, the fear of losing the one person who had pierced his armored heart. Violet swallowed hard, her pulse racing like a trapped bird against her rib cage. The weight of his words settled over her like a tangible force, pressing down on her shoulders, forcing her to confront the whirlwind inside. Her mind swirled with fear, doubt, and memories of everything that had led her here. The terror of being hunted by his enemies, the electric thrill of their stolen moments in hidden safe houses, the quiet strength he had shown when he bandaged her wounds after a narrow escape. She recalled the night they first kissed, amid the ruins of an abandoned factory where gunfire had echoed like thunder, his lips claiming hers with a hunger that mirrored her own buried desires. And then there were the softer times, the rare evenings when he let his guard down, sharing stories of his childhood in the slums, of the brother he lost to the very violence he now commanded. Those glimpses had humanized him, turned the monster of legend into a man she could love. But the thought of leaving him, of stepping away into a world that had no claim over her anymore, a mundane existence of anonymous apartments and forgotten bylines, felt hollow, like a shell devoid of soul. She remembered the fear in her chest when he had not been there to find her during her brief captivity, the emptiness of knowing she had no one watching, no one to protect her with the ferocity only Elio could muster. Independence, once her prized possession, now seemed like isolation, and she realized, with a clarity that cut through the fog of doubt, that she could not return to a life of solitude, of pretending that she could escape the force that had claimed her heart. This world of shadows and power had become hers too, reshaping her into someone stronger, more alive. Her gaze met his, steady and unwavering, the green of her eyes reflecting the resolve building within. "I am yours," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands, "not because I have no choice, but because I choose it, because I want it." The words spilled out like a confession, laced with the passion that had been simmering between them. She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips, feeling the stubble rough against her skin, a tactile reminder of his reality. A shadow of relief crossed his features, though his intensity remained, a storm barely contained. He moved closer, letting his hand find hers, strong, steady, unyielding, their fingers intertwining like vines that had grown together over time. Every inch of him radiated the certainty that had drawn her in from the first moment, every glance, every motion confirming that he would protect her, that he would fight for her, that he would never allow anything to take her from him. "You've always been mine," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "But hearing you say it, it changes everything." He pulled her into his embrace, his arms encircling her waist, holding her as if she were the anchor keeping him from drifting into the abyss of his own darkness. Outside, the night seemed to pause, the distant hum of the city fading into insignificance. The mansion's grounds, patrolled by loyal guards with eyes sharp as hawks, felt like a fragile bubble against the encroaching threats. The city, indifferent and sprawling, faded into the distance, its neon glow a mere backdrop to the drama unfolding within these walls. Inside, their connection was absolute, a force that bound them together in ways that words could never fully express. Danger had shaped them, forging their bond in the crucible of adversity. Fear had tested them, revealing strengths neither knew they possessed, and yet here they stood, unbroken, united by choice and by bond. Elio's grip tightened slightly, a silent affirmation that nothing could undo what had been forged between them. Violet felt it deep in her chest, a grounding, an anchor in the storm of her thoughts. She had faced the unknown, the threat that had loomed over her like a perpetual shadow, and she had chosen the only path that felt true. She belonged to him, and he belonged to her in ways that neither could ignore, a mutual possession that transcended power dynamics. It was love, raw and unfiltered, born not in fairy tales, but in the grit of survival. The final test had been survival, but the ultimate choice had been acceptance. Violet had accepted the world. He ruled the clandestine meetings in smoke-filled rooms, the alliances sealed with handshakes or bullets, the constant vigilance that came with being at the top. She had accepted the force he carried, the danger that came with loving him, knowing that every day could bring new perils. and in doing so, she had accepted herself, her courage, and her heart, embracing the transformation from outsider to integral part of his life. Elio stepped closer, letting his presence surround her, a protective magnetic force that made the air between them pulse with certainty. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only the unspoken truth that they were bound together. Whatever threats awaited them, whispers of an impending raid by federal agents, or the machinations of a traitor within his ranks could not sever the connection that had been solidified through fire, fear, and devotion. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a promise sealed in the heat of the moment. She responded in kind, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer as if to merge their very essences. Violet tilted her head, meeting his gaze fully, allowing herself to feel the depth of the moment, the weight of everything they had endured from the high-speed chases through rain-lashed streets to the quiet confessions shared under starless skies. "I am with you," she said again, quietly, fully, the words carrying more strength than any declaration of loyalty. They carried love, choice, and recognition of the world they now shared, a partnership forged in equality, despite the imbalance of power. Elio nodded, his expression finally softening just enough to reveal the humanity beneath the force, the man who laughed at her wry jokes, who traced patterns on her skin in the dead of night, who dreamed of a future beyond the Empire. He moved beside her to the window, hands brushing as they watched the city below. It stretched endlessly, a maze of lights, shadows, and life, teeming with millions unaware of the battles waged in its underbelly. But for them, it was a backdrop, secondary to the bond they had forged, a canvas upon which their story would continue to unfold. No one could touch her, no one could take her from him. And in that knowledge, they found a calm that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Together, they had faced every threat, survived every challenge, and emerged with the unbroken certainty that their lives were intertwined. Violet leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his chest, syncing her breath with his. Violet's hand tightened in his, a small gesture laden with meaning. His presence was steady, unyielding, and unwavering, a constant in a world of variables. The night outside stretched on, indifferent to the lives it held, but inside, in the quiet of the mansion, two hearts had found the rhythm that would carry them forward. Their world was dangerous, yes, riddled with espionage, power struggles, and the ever-present specter of loss, but it was theirs, and they would face it together, armed with the unbreakable alliance they had built. The city would continue its pulse. The threats would continue to rise like waves against a shore. But for this moment, for this night, Violet and Elio stood together, united, bound by choice, loyalty, and love. The ultimate decision had been made. She had accepted him, and he had claimed her. Their future was uncertain, a path fraught with unknowns, but the foundation was unshakable, built on mutual respect and shared scars. As the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, coloring the sky with soft pinks and golds, they remained side by side, ready for whatever came next, knowing that no force could ever separate them. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation, now felt like a haven, and the city below, awakening to a new day, held promise rather than peril. In each other's arms, they had found not just survival, but a profound, enduring peace. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.